Hello and welcome to the 90 Minute Fever podcast with Steve and Nick. I'm Steve, one of the admins in game, manager of Strictly Butterside Up in the Twilight FA, and Nick is the lead developer of 90 Minute Fever. This is the 18th podcast in the series. It's been a while since the last one, as Nick and the team have been beavering away on the new match engine. But if you're interested in the previous podcasts, they're all available on the Isocron YouTube channel. In today's podcast, we are going to be discussing some aspects of the new match engine and tell you guys a little bit about the opening of the test world and how you can help with testing. So, Nick, let's kick things off with the obvious question: how's development been going?
It's looking good, I think. Like, we're pretty happy about it, and we're pretty excited with where it is. But I think also maybe even more so, it's like, how do you say, like we won't have everything in this initial release that we want to have in it. Obviously, there's a lot of things we want to do to improve it, and more features to add and stuff over time. So it's like, yeah, we're very, very excited to not only have it coming together, but also knowing that we can do everything that we want to do.
Yeah,
and we will get there, and it's very motivating just to sort of see that by actualization or something, by actually having it in front of you, actually seeing it. You know, it's one thing saying that you can do something, and it's another thing actually doing it. It's very easy just to sit back and say, yeah, we can do this and this and this. You know, not everything is. There are many things that are not straightforward and very complex, and I think this is, you know, it's just very complex in nature. I don't think there's a reason why this type of match engine doesn't really exist in any other online games, and it isn't because I don't think people just don't want to have it. I think it's just because it's very difficult and it's a lot of work. And it's very complex.
So I guess it's showing this whole match. There's no shortcuts, is there? You've got to calculate everything all the time, I suppose.
Yep, and in real time.
Yeah,
which is a huge complexity, because there's I don't know, like, it's very it'd be much more straightforward if we didn't show it in real time, if we didn't have this real time interaction in matches, but actually showing it and actually simulating it in real time.
So you're basically saying, you know, if you were showing people like replays of the match that's already taken place, it'd be a hell of a lot easier technically than
way
allowing
easier.
you to interact with it, basically.
Yeah, and that's how most online football management games work for that reason, because it's so much easier to do, and so much less potential sort of problems that can happen. And, you know, the more technically complex it is, the more exposed you are to bugs and problems, and the more it's going to cost in server costs and things like that as well. So, but, you know, we get it. We'll have it. So, you know, it's that's good. I mean, yeah, but just actually simulating something that's as complex as this and doing it in real time and allowing people to interact with it in real time. I don't think that there is any other online football management game that allows. I could be wrong, because I'm not. There's so many of them. Honestly, I wouldn't even be aware of half of the ones that exist. But as far as I know, there just isn't any. Like, we'll be the only one to have something like this. So that's pretty exciting. And I think what we'll have initially is going to be, well, you know, it's going to be a new match engine, so it's clearly going to have some issues and some imbalances and things, but in regards to sort of functionality and things, I think it's going to be miles ahead of any other online football management games that exist, and that's also without what you could probably say is at least half of what we want to add to it over time as well. So I think the bigger concern really is somehow getting everything in we want to get into it, and not and having it still usable, let's say, because you'll see the whole match and it will be in real time, so you don't want to have sort of thousands of options and people having to go to different screens, and like you want to be able to have a user interface where you can watch the match and you can make your changes whilst watching the match.
Yeah. So on that subject, Nick, is that something that's going to be in place so that you've got the match in the background and you've like in similar to the current system with the overlays, you're going to be putting the overlays on top of it, but you still see the match going?
Yeah, pretty much. I think probably the easiest way to envisage it is be very similar to what it looks like in the current match, except that rather than it being a wallpaper in the background, you could think of the wallpaper as being the live match or something. So the background image will be the pitch and the live action, and then you can put, essentially there will be like a panel area either side of the pitch, sort of like free space, and you can put your overlays there and they won't interrupt your view of the pitch. But you could also put overlays on top of the pitch as well, and it will just be easy to sort of show and hide them. So you can essentially, because there'll be some, for example, if you want to change your formation and things like that, that are too, you're going to have to put that over the top of the pitch because it's too big to have it in one of the side panel areas.
Yeah, sure.
So the idea is you basically activate the overlay, make your changes, apply them, and then close the overlay or minimize the overlay.
Yeah, and I guess it'll be semi-transparent sort of thing. So
so you'll still see through it, but it will just depending on the overlay, because some you'll be fine to have permanently over the pitch, especially if it's near sort of the corners of it. Mm-hmm. So you might be okay, for example, to have your match chat if you want sort of permanently semi overlaying your pitch. So each user would be able to just decide how they want to set it up.
Yeah.
But there are certain things like the one with the formation that it'll be transparent, but then there will be things like it's the non-text, non-graphical part of it that's transparent. If that makes sense, the background. So
yeah, of course, yeah.
So the shirts or whatever that you are changing, to change your formation and to see your formation, that's going to block quite a part of the view. In practice, it will. Because if it's too transparent, you won't be able to see properly the tactical changes that you're making.
The widget itself, yeah.
So you've got to get the balance there, right? But yeah, the idea is very much you'll have this sort of panel areas down each side of the pitch that you can put the stuff that you just want. If you want your chat there all the time, you can have it. If you want your team instruction sliders, you could have them there all the time. If you want some match stats, you could have them there all the time. But you wouldn't be able to have everything on the screen because most of the screen is going to, without covering up the pitch, because most of the screen will be the pitch.
Okay, cool. And so what we're expecting is what will be there initially in the new match engine. Clearly, you can't, as you already alluded to, you can't get everything in you want to in the very first release. What are we expecting to be there and maybe not be there to start with?
Good question. I'll go on the fly a bit here, but you'll see the pitch and as we've just been discussing. So you see the whole pitch, and it'll be like a top-down view. The players will be represented as circles.
Sure.
So outside of that, you will see the overlays that we were alluding to. You'll obviously still see the top bar and the score and the clock of the match and all that stuff. You'll have the team instruction sliders. There will be more than what there is now. I believe there will be 12. We can go over what they are and what they do.
Yeah, perhaps we could go through those in a few minutes. Sure. Yeah.
There will be match stats. We want to do a lot of them, but come back to that because we don't know what will be there initially. Come back to that one in a second because there's some other stuff that falls in the same bucket as that. So another one is the commentary. So we essentially plan to scrap the commentary as it exists now because it will be very complicated. It will be a lot of work for us to essentially tie in the flavor text to ensure that it sort of aligns to what you see on the pitch all the time.
Yeah, and you're effectively seeing the whole game anyway, so Yeah.
And it's such a huge amount of work to sort of have that, because if it's saying that something's happening and you're seeing something else, that's going to be worse than not having it at all. And it's a lot of work, that is, and we just feel like it, compared to other stuff that we'll go into, it's just low priority basically. So I think we'll have something one day, but it's going to be after much of the other stuff that we're going to discuss. However, that being said, we do intend to basically replace the existing commentary system with a new one that would be a bit more like an events feed. So rather than being full of flavor text, it would be more like, so-and-so got a yellow card, it's a corner for this team, it's a goal, whatever. So it tells you just things that actually... So when you, sort of like when there's that timeline and it puts the little icons on there. So it'll be more like it tells you when an icon's going to appear, and then it appears on the feed kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then also that has that big added benefit that we could, if that list of things is only like, I don't know, less than 100, then we could get them translated. Whereas right now, I can't even remember. I think there's more than like 10,000 sentences of commentary or something created. It's like a lot. I don't honestly. And it's just impossible for us to ask anybody to translate that. It's such a huge job, right? So we've got a real issue with the match commentary at the moment that it can't really be translated. And plus a lot of things is like idioms and phrases and things like that. They don't actually translate.
Yeah. But I think in general the commentary is less important when you actually see what's going on in the match anyway. You can see where your player's got it running down the wing with it. You can see a player doing various things. So yeah, I think more an events feed.
I mean, it would be obviously nice to be able to still have just saying that the translations are an issue, and it's as is having it synchronized. It's just such a huge project to have that, and it's just low priority compared to having lots of the extra player stats and extra stats and extra tactical options and having it graphically look better, and it's just really low on the priority list. So I don't want to say that we will never do more with it. Just saying it won't be anytime soon. Basically, that one's super low priority. The other thing that we won't have initially, probably, or at least if it does, it will be only to a very basic degree, is set piece instructions. So you probably can pick, for example, who's going to take your penalty and corner and whatever. But I don't think we will have any ability for people to be able to set where they want all their players to stand on corners, for example.
Sure.
One, because there's one, it's lower priority than having other stuff done at the moment. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is that it's also quite a big amount of work to do it in regards to balancing, because stuff like that is just hugely open to exploitation. And we don't really want to have it like a game where all that matters is how many corners you get. And if you have a corner banging centre half and you just win all the matches, and you have centre half scoring 30 goals a season or something, like, we don't want that. And it would be a shame if we ended up with something like, essentially nothing really matters except your corner instructions. So we don't really want to be worried about that or focusing on that. So we essentially have corners. You'll be able to probably pick who takes them, and they will happen, but you just won't be able to pick exactly where everybody's going to stand. Although we would like to do some more advanced instructions at some point for that and give some control. We just don't know how much. But the main thing is we just don't want it to be completely exploitable. So we don't know how much control or how it will work. It'd be quite a bit of work just to sort that out, and we just don't want to be getting derailed focusing on stuff like that at the moment, because it's quite fringe, really. Things like corner instructions are quite fringe, really, compared to like all your other tactical instructions, let's say, and a lot of other stuff. So,
okay.
So we do intend to have some form, and this sort of has some overlap with what we're just discussing with the set piece instructions, but we do with the exception that rather than being lower priority, they're higher priority. So we do intend to have some way to have individual player instructions, but they won't be there on the initial release to live. Just mostly again because of the exploitation issues. Like, we don't want to implement something that that is just completely exploitable and has silly formation, like, you know, people just setting things and winning 10-0, 20-0 and stuff. And it's just that it adds so much complexity if you have individual player instructions that we just really afraid of what that could mean. So we have a lot of the structures in place for it already in the code. What we want to do something, we just want to do it in such a way that doesn't have exploitation issues and is fair and balanced in gameplay. So essentially gives you control as a user to have your team to play how you want them to play, but isn't completely exploitable.
Yep.
And we just don't want to deal with that problem. Like, if we deal with that problem now, essentially is going to delay the release of the match engine for a month or two, probably. And we just don't want to. We just feel like we can get in the match engine without that and add these things like add these extra ways, you know, these extra tactical instructions. We could add them 1 month after we release it to live. So we don't feel like it's worth delaying the release. So we definitely want to do, unlike the corner instructions, which may not happen for, you know, multiple months, the individual player instructions, or a way to have more control over what your players do individually, we definitely want to do something, but we just...
So something will happen in that area reasonably quickly, but just not in the initial release, is effectively what you're saying. Yeah, okay.
And it's a bit hard to say how long, because it really depends on so many things, including like what problems and issues there are, like how many issues. Because obviously, when we release this, if there's sort of problems, the priority is going to have to be to sort the problems out before we add any
of course,
features, right? So it's a bit hard to say without knowing exactly how many problems we've got. And you'll be able to set your formation, obviously, for your team. And we do intend to still have... I mean, most online football management games, you can't set your formation how you can just pick from a predefined list of formations. And we do intend to still keep it so that you can make your own formations and have asymmetrical formations. We'd like to... I mean, it's got exploitation issues. This is the problem. So, but we want to try and make it work, and So I think in practice, what that's going to mean a few things. So one, there will be some restrictions or limits on what you can do with your formation. So, for example, you won't be able to have no defenders and things like that. So one, it's going to help with people sort of having their little moment where the toys have gone out the pram or something, and they've thrown 5 attackers and 5 attacking midfielders, and they're not happy or whatever. So we'll stop people doing stuff in the heat of the moment that's a bit stupid. But it will also stop, we can also essentially mean that, you can make 500 different formations, but you can't make these 50 that nobody would ever do in real life, type of thing.
Yeah, sure. So in practice, are we saying that, you must always have like 2 centre-halves, for example, or at least 2 defenders?
2 centre. I think at least 2 central defenders. Probably there'll be a bunch of rules, but it'll probably be like, for example, you need to have at least 2 central defenders, but you also need to have at least 3 defenders, maybe. Or if you could have only 2, but then you need 4, like 2 wing backs and 2 holding midfielders or something. I don't have the exact list of rules. It's not confirmed.
But just to ensure people are doing sensible things.
Yeah, but in practice, it should just basically mean that every single formation that anyone would ever use in real life, you can use it. Yep. That's all the rules are going to mean. So you won't be able to do things like play 5 defenders and 5 defensive midfielders and no midfielders or attacking midfielders or strikers, for example. So the other thing is that we're going to make it so that only goalkeepers can play in goal. And one of your 7 substitutes is sort of reserved to be for a substitute goalkeeper. It has to be a substitute goalkeeper. So essentially, your starting goalkeeper has to be a goalkeeper, and one of your 7 substitutes, and only one of your 7 substitutes, can be a goalkeeper.
Yep. Okay.
And then if your goalkeeper gets sent off or injured during the match, then you have to bring your substitute goalkeeper on in goal. And then we've got a bit of a problem to worry about that if you've already made all your subs and you can't do it or something. But we've got a couple of options there. One of which is like essentially we'll just make it so that if you've already made all your subs or you've already got your backup keeper on, then your goalkeeper can't get injured or sent off. We just hard code it so that he's invincible or whatever in regards to injury. There's a couple of other options. So we're not quite sure what we'll do there, but
either way, there'll be some kind of limit in there to ensure people are doing sensible things and playing goalkeepers in goal, basically. That's the bottom line.
I mean, the bigger problem is where people are sort of intentionally not putting a goalkeeper in goal as opposed to simply just getting unlucky, let's say. So it might be the case that we could just leave it so that if you happen to get both your keepers sent off or injured in a match or whatever, then bad luck.
Yeah.
So, but we're not too worried about it because it's such a fringe issue anyway. Really, because even if we made it that your backup keeper can't get injured, like it's gonna affect 1 in 10,000 matches or something. Like it's where it could ever be an issue. It's such a fringe thing. We're more worried about one. There's just 2 real issues here to be sorting out. So one is where people are essentially throwing matches.
Yeah.
By just doing things either intentionally to throw them in advance or just in the heat of the moment because they're unhappy about something. And the other thing is that we just want some limits to essentially mean that we don't have to test completely stupid, unrealistic formations to make sure that they're balanced in the game. So we don't have to test the classic 5 striker, 3 attacking midfielder, 2 centre half formation that everybody plays in real life. We don't have to make sure that doesn't result in craziness happening and you winning all your matches. We only essentially have to limit the scope of what we do for testing to be limited to only stuff that could realistically ever happen in real life. So yes, so you'll still be able to create your own formations. And the other thing is, even though we don't intend to start with the individual player instructions, we do intend to have one initially, which you'll be able to set the individual mentality for each player. So you'll be able to assign them to sort of their mentality to be defend or attack or mixed.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to be very important. That will be a big deal in regards to your formation design and things like that. How you assign the mentalities to each of the players.
Yeah.
So you can have the same formation. 2 teams could have the same formation and the same tactical instructions, but setting these individual mentality of your players differently to each other would result in the teams playing very differently to each other.
Okay, cool. So, well, I mean, I guess you're sort of brushing on that, but I think we mentioned that we're going to take a closer look at the team sliders that are going to be in the game.
Sure.
So I think the listeners will be very interested in what's going to be there. So, I mean, that seems like a good one to start with. I think there's a mentality slider. How's that going to work? That'll be the first. Is that the first one?
Yeah. It is. Well, I don't know if it's the first one, but we can make it the first one. I think it will be. I think it will actually be the first one on the list. The list that the 12 will appear is not sure, but we'll go through an order. But this is no specific order exactly. But so one is a bit of an exception to the rule, which we'll start with, which is the team mentality or mentality for the team. Now, this doesn't actually do anything by itself, but what you can do is you can set, when I said you can set each of your individual players to be defend or attack or mixed, you can also set them to be team. There'll be the option to sort of, rather than picking one of those options, you can override it to be the team value, and then it will be the value of this slider. So this slider, unlike all the other sliders, will have 7 settings, but this one will only have 3. This one will just have defend or mixed or attack. So essentially, any players you have set to team, it will sort of anchor or match or tie, synchronize, I don't know what the word is, to tie the individual player mentalities for those who have it set to team to be the team mentality slider.
Yeah, so basically for each player you can effectively say you want your fullback to be, if you set it to mixed, he'll always be mixed whatever you do with this slider. However, if you set it to team and then moved your mentality slider to attacking, the fullback would then have an attacking mentality, correct?
Correct, except not correct, because the fullbacks can't have an attacking mentality.
Oh, okay. So you can set them to defend or mixed,
correct,
or team. If you set it to team, it'd be controlled by the slider. Is that right?
Correct. That is correct.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there might be more. There might be. I think initially, yeah. So essentially, not every position can have every mentality, basically. So you can't make your goalkeeper and your defenders attacking, basically.
Yeah.
And you can't make your strikers defensive, sort of thing.
Right. So I guess each row, the midfielder you can probably do all three with,
Correct.
but your defenders and your defensive midfielders, maybe it's just defend and mixed, and your attackers and attacking midfielders would just be attack and mixed or something like that.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. And I understand the central defenders are slightly different. Is that right?
Yeah. So central defenders sort of have like they're special in that you can't. They have to have defend mentality. They can't have mixed.
Mm-hmm.
They have to have. So instead of the mentality for the defenders being like that, you instead choosing how you want them, sort of like that, exactly how aggressive or passive you want them to defend. So you can essentially instruct them to sort of dive in for tackles and things like that, or back off and sort of cover space, or a mixture of both.
Sure. Okay. So I guess in a standard, just going back to the general things, so in a standard 4-4-2, just to put a practical example, you might have you can't change the defenders. We're talking about the mentality slide here, just to confirm. So the central defenders are always set to defend. The fullbacks, in a standard 4-4-2, if you want to be more defensive, you could have them set to defend, and you might have one of your midfielders set to defend as well. You might have the other one set to mixed, or maybe even to attack. Your wingers, you could have defensive wingers, but you're probably more likely to have them mixed or maybe attack. So you can set each player effectively. You can sort of give an individual mentality to.
Correct, and you can make it asymmetrical.
Right. Okay.
So you can make one fullback mixed and the other defend.
Sure.
So yeah, and I think with the centre halves, if you've got, it's different if you have three, but if you have two, I think typically you would want So I think it's like one of them to have this sort of dive in advance, basically try to make tackles, come off the defensive line, and the other one to cover space and back off. So you want basically sort of like one of them set to sort of be the more aggressive sort of defending, and the other to be the more sort of safe passive defending, or you want both mixed.
Yeah, so make their own decisions effectively in each situation.
You probably now. So if you have three, it's different. And I'm sure there's exceptions, and it's hard to say because at the end of, that's the intention anyway. As to what happens in practice, especially with all the things that could possibly happen, who knows? But that's sort of how it's designed. And in real life, that's more or less how teams work. You have this, they work in pairs like that typically, where where they sort of divide up the responsibilities, or they share them all, one of the two.
Yep. Okay. Right. So that's the mentality slider. Let's move on to the next one. Philosophy.
Yeah. So this is how much your team will hold their formation when attacking versus sort of being happy to move away from their specific positions in the formation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So
rigid versus fluid. So essentially, how much you hold your formation versus how much players are happy to not hold the formation.
Okay. All right. What's the next one? Tempo.
Yeah, it's how much urgency the team has to move the ball up the pitch, basically, and sort of make something happen, as it were. So it's like a prioritization kind of thing to just get it up the pitch, have a shot, score a goal, versus slower tempo, which is you sort of deprioritize. So you're essentially prioritizing retaining possession at the expense of maybe actually constructively doing anything with it.
Sure.
So you're just sort of doing short passes around in circles without ever going anywhere. Let's say, as it were.
So I'm guessing this could be quite extreme either way potentially. So you really could be doing passing around in circles, not doing anything to hold a lead. So this could be quite a useful slider in those situations, or if you really need a goal, you just want to get it up there. That's sort of where we're going with this one. Okay. Right, next one. Right, there's a few passing ones here, but let's go through them. So passing style.
Yeah, so this is like direct versus shorter passing. So it doesn't mean they will only do one or the other. It just means that if you have direct passing, they will just look more to make more longer passes, but they will still do some shorter passes, and vice versa kind of thing. So I think with the shorter passing, they will attempt quite a few long passes and really focus on the shorter passing. But obviously, if you set it to long passing, they're not just not every player is just going to hoof it up the pitch every time they ever touch the ball just because you set that. So they still do some shorter passes. So it's more like whether you want some longer passes and some shorter passes with direct passing, or versus mostly just doing shorter passing with short or something in between.
Yeah. Okay. And passing focus is the next one.
Yeah, so that's basically essentially focusing your passing on wide areas of the pitch or through the centre, or a combination of both.
Okay, nice and simple. And passing freedom, I think, is the final
one. Yeah, so this is how willing your team is to pass the ball into space for their teammates to run onto, versus only really trying to focus directly passing it to teammates' feet.
So is it like a sort of how risky their passing is going to be?
Like that, yeah. So it's kind of like how much they pass into space. Like, it was a tricky one for the name, to be honest. It is kind of like how much they pass it into. Well, the thing is, just because you want them to pass it into space more doesn't mean they'll never pass it directly to their teammates' feet. It's just that if you only want them to pass it to their feet, they will rarely pass it into space. They just won't take the risk. If that makes sense.
Yep. Okay.
So it's like, do you want your team to be really conservative and safe and sort of only directly pass it to teammates, or do you want them to sometimes pass it into space as well, or do you want something in between?
Okay. Right. Okay. I think that makes sense. Next one, attacking width. So there's obviously a pair here. So attacking width
and defensive width. So it's essentially when your team's attacking, how wide or narrow the team sort of holds their formation.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, for example, and defending is the same for when defending. So what you can do is set like a narrow defensive width and a wide attacking width, and it essentially means that your fullbacks and your wingers will drift wider when attacking, but then they'll tuck in more when defending.
Got you. Okay. Or vice versa, if you wanted it that way.
Yeah, or anything in between, yeah.
Okay. On to the next one, which, again, there's sort of a pair here, I think. Defensive line is the first one, and engagement line would be the other one. I'm guessing there's a bit of a pair here. So defensive line?
Yeah, so defensive line is just how deep or high up the pitch your team will look to hold its defensive line. Do we need to explain? I don't know. It's a bit, the defensive line... Do we need to?
I would think most of the listeners
generally
know generally where they.
I think that one is. The engagement line may not be that.
Okay, so let's talk more about. I don't think
that's a generic footballing term that they use on television and stuff. So engagement line is essentially how deep or high up the pitch your team will start trying to win the ball back off the opposition. So they kind of do work as a pair in that if you have a deep defensive line, you probably want a deeper engagement line. If you have a high defensive line, you want a high engagement line. So if your defensive line is high up the pitch, you want to start trying to win the ball back very quickly off the other team, pretty much straight away all the time. Whereas if you have a deep defensive line, you typically will want your players to drop back to defend. Yeah. So you wouldn't want them all running up the pitch to chase somebody down you don't want to stretch your team too much. You want some kind of defending compactness. So typically, deeper engagement line, a deeper defensive line, or higher engagement line, higher defensive line. But you can do a little bit in between. But setting like a deep defensive line and a high engagement line might be a bit of a recipe for disaster, to be honest. I'm not sure. Maybe there's ways that you could offset that, especially if you have... I don't know, but yeah. So it's done with the intention that they sort of work a little bit as a pair, but you can do little bits in between. Like you could have like a something in between like a sort of deep but not maximum deep defensive line, but you could have your engagement line drop all the way off. So you sort of, because you might have pacey defenders, but you just want to create like a very compact wall that they have to work through, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Like you don't want your defensive line all the way back, but you also don't want them running too high up the pitch to win the ball. You're just saying, we're here, get through us. And our defenders are too fast for you to pass it over the top. So you got to go through us, and there's 10 of us all standing here. And there's not much, you got to go through us. So I think there's options there. I just think it's just sort of them being set to the exact opposite of each other is probably, I can't think of any examples in real life where any team would do that.
No, it would seem a bit crazy. Okay, on to the next one. Getting towards the end now. Closing down. What it sounds like, I guess.
Yeah, it's just how much your team presses. Pretty much, like how aggressively they press. So how much they do it, how much they close down, how likely they are to want to do it, how they're willing to run further to do it. So,
sure.
Versus not wanting to do it.
Okay.
That's so much.
And finally, tackling.
Yeah, we're still TBC this one. It's
right.
The only one that's not. We will have it. There's still to be confirmed, unfortunately. But we got things that we think it will do, but we don't know for sure. So I don't know if it's worth. Obviously, it's going to impact something to do with the tackling.
Yeah, goes without saying.
But I don't know if it's worth talking about because I don't want to say something and then it ends up not being the case.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Hopefully that gives people a bit of an idea of the sort of team controls they're going to have when we release the match engine. It's not a final
list either. That might be worth. It's possible there could. It's not finalised. I doubt any of these won't be there, but it might be the case that more are there. Or it might be the case that something gets a slight change or a rename or something. But this is very much... I think it's very much in the ballpark of what will be there.
Great. So. Okay, right. Well, let's move on. Let's start talking about the testing arrangements. I understand that as we said previously, we're going to open a testing world for people to come and have an early go with the match engine and hopefully find some bugs for us.
So we'll have a separate application game. Not sure what it's called. Mm-hmm. Is it a game or an application in your Steam library? Not sure. So there will be a separate game. Let's just go with game. A separate game that you can install in your Steam library that will essentially be for the test world of 90 Minute Fever. So anybody who previously played in beta when we had that, it will be very similar. It's pretty much how that worked. It'll just be called, it'll just be called the test world instead of the beta one.
Yep.
We intend to make it so that people can get access to it the same way that people previously got access to beta, which is essentially you'll be able to do it through the preferences menu in the live client. If you don't already have access to the test world, there'll just be a button to request access. You click that, and then it will add it to your Steam library, and then you install it, and then you can get in.
Mm-hmm. So anyone who's
got access to the game will be able to get access to the test world. It won't be like beta. We'll have some pretty big differences to beta though. So one, it won't be a separate game world as such. What it will be is a copy of the live world, and it will be periodically reset to be a refreshed copy of the live world. Sure. So essentially what it means is when you log in, you will have exactly the same as what you've got in live as of a point in time that probably wasn't very long ago. We periodically reset it, and it'll probably be multiple times per month. So there's no real. The idea here isn't to have another game world for people to play in. The idea is to have a place for people to test the match engine. Yeah. So this will mean that people will be able to understand how their current team is going to, get some idea about how it's going to play with the new match engine. Mm-hmm. Because they will have the same team and the same players, and they will be able to play matches and see how their team goes. And So that's one part, but obviously the other part is we just want people to test it. We want people to find broken formations that bust things, make the whole thing crash. We want people to find big exploits that we need to close off. If there's technical issues, we need to know about them. And, people have feedback about things that they would... there's all sorts of feedback, some that we probably can't do because it's just going to be too big in scope, but there's probably smaller things that people can't do immediately, let's say. But there's certainly, I imagine there'll be a lot of small suggestions that we could probably get done. So essentially, feedback, suggestions, balance issues, exploits, bugs, crashing, and then this is just the match itself. And obviously, it's a new match engine in the game. There's a lot of architectural changes. There's a lot of other things that could be broken in the game outside of the match because of the new match engine.
Okay.
As well, like for example, the score didn't record correctly, or something. The stats didn't record at all, or the request match thing isn't working for you. I don't know. There could be other unrelated issues, sort of thing, because it's just so much code is impacted by this that pretty much anything could possibly be broken as well.
Right. Okay.
In the game. So, because like we had before, obviously we updated a lot of, we had these issues, or we updated a lot of stuff in preparation and broke a lot of stuff in the game. So we've updated more since. We don't think this, but it's not deployed to the current live, right? So it's possible there could be other completely unrelated issues as well. So we just generally need testing. So the other thing as well is that we don't intend to have it like online 24/7. It'll probably be online most of the time, but we don't intend to sort of provide 24/7 support for it or anything. And we also, like, if it's got a problem, and we might take it offline, and it might take half a day for us to get it back, because it won't be like number one priority, because we won't be treating it like a production environment. And also, we might be the case that we want to update something, and it's going to take us a couple of days to update it. So we're just going to take a couple of days to update it.
Mm-hmm.
Basically. So so it won't be there all the time, although it should be there most of the time. And it'll be periodically reset to sort of be pulled back to live. And I don't know if there's... I think that is in regards to the arrangements. Is there any other... I don't think we missed anything, did we?
I think that's fine.
So probably the only other thing that's worth mentioning is in regards to what will be there. So we essentially intend to stagger the implementation, to stagger the features or something. So of the new match engine stuff into testing. So we basically intend to start with the foundational. Well, I don't know how staggered. It might only be 2 or 3 stages, to be honest. I don't think it's going to be hundreds of stages or anything like that. But we intend to, at the very least, we intend to do 2 stages, probably 3. But so we intend to put in basically all the foundational elements of the match engine. So this is like literally the ability to connect to the matches, to play them, and to interact with them. So get that technical side of, for the technical related bugs, but then also in regards to the gameplay and balance issues, I think what we want to do is have start with the players' attributes disabled, if you like.
So all the players are the same, effectively.
Yeah.
Just to see what the team sliders do.
And formations and player mentalities. So just to make sure that, because if all of those, if there's major exploits to be had before player attributes are doing anything, that we need to sort those exploits out first.
Yep.
And having player attributes is gonna like muddy the waters a lot in regards to where the issues are, let's say. Because a super formation might be a super formation because you've got players with specific attributes that work really well with that super formation. Now that is an issue, but that's much less of an issue as if there's a super formation that's super irrespective of what players you have.
Absolutely, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
So I don't know how long. We don't imagine that, like, and then we'll add in the attributes, and obviously there's this other stuff that'll be added, but I think that's the 2 major stages. Is that we just want to. So it might not be that long between them, to be honest. It really depends on the feedback, because if there are major exploits discovered in regards to super formations, we got to sort those out before we add the attributes in. But if
Yeah,
there aren't
yeah.
any, it probably won't be that long at all before we enable them and add them in. So
Okay.
so I think that's the two major things. But then obviously there's still not everything's done. So I think it's a lot of the like we were talking about that before. So like we'll have some stats, but we want to add more in, and we don't know exactly which ones will end up there because it's just not a priority. Like we definitely want to have lots of stats, but it's not a priority versus having the work, let's say.
Sure.
Having no major super formations or exploits, having people like be able, but making it fun, for example, like if you don't making it architecturally work with the client server stuff and making sure that all people hopefully don't have sort of technical issues in regards to connecting to matches and maybe sort of major ping issues and things like that. So the stats are basically nice to have, right? That's the thing.
Absolutely.
And it's almost like an endless list of what you could do. So we definitely intend to, have stats, but probably in line with what we've got at the moment initially. But we want to add a lot more over time. But it's just versus, say, the AI versus how it looks graphically versus the user interface. Like, we just want to have those things working and well. And we just don't think it's worth... It's a bit like the corner instructions, really. It's just not worth delaying the release of the new Match Engine 2 live just because we want to add a whole bunch of extra statistics in for people to see, versus getting it in a month earlier and then adding in all those extra stats a month later. But I think the stats are higher priority than having... Well, the thing is, there's a lot of stats you could have. So it's very much as a how long is a piece of string thing. So I don't know. Yeah. Don't know exactly what we'd end up with, but we'll have at least probably about what we got now, and we'll have a lot more than we have now. But in regards to really advanced statistics like individual player possession, heat maps and touch maps and all that sort of stuff, I don't think that stuff will be coming in the imminent near future because it just I think we'd rather, for example, it's a higher priority, for example, probably to get these sort of what we want to do with the individual player instructions, tactical instructions, before we have those type of really advanced statistical stuff in the game.
Okay, right. One final thing I wanted to talk about on this podcast, Nick. I think there's going to be a sneak preview video coming up soon with some match footage, isn't there?
Yeah, it'll be later this month. I don't know exactly when, but it will be this month. We just have to... We haven't made it yet, obviously, so we just want to get... I think one of the biggest... sort of the weakest link in many ways in what we got at the moment is the user interface. It's kind of very much one of the key thing we're trying to get sorted. So it's... And obviously we need that to show something. We need it to some degree. So we're close. We'll have something this month. I just don't know whether it'll be sooner or closer to the end of it. And... I don't want to derail things too much because we're quite close, to getting it into beta. Anyway, for everybody to see it with their own eyes. Anyway, so I don't know. We don't want to delay ourselves too much to get the video done. Basically. So we want the development path to take its natural optimal way, and when we get to the point where we can do the video, we'll do it. And when we do it, we really don't want to spend too many hours putting it together. So, but I think what we'd like to show is just really just something sort of short and sweet that just illustrates a lot of the tactical instructions and what they do. Just so you can
move around the sliders so you can see it on the...
Because we didn't really discuss this too much, but one of the big... we did in the last podcast, but not in this one. We didn't really say... one of the big things that we're doing, or we're really wanting to do with, especially the tactical instructions, and also with most of the player attributes. Well, player attributes are a little bit more of a mixed bag, but with all the tactical instructions, we really want to make it really obvious. Well, relatively obvious, let's say, what you can see what they do. You change something, you can see that it's changed how your team is playing. Like, we really want that to be true for all the tactical instructions. Now, for the player attributes, some will be obvious, others will be less obvious. Like,
you can see how quick a player is, can't you? With them, so if they've got high pace, you're going to see their player moving around a lot quicker.
But a lot of the technical ones, it's like, if they can shoot better, they'll score more goals. But it doesn't mean that every single shot they ever take will be better, right? So it's like a lot of the attributes over the course of many matches, you could see that all the attributes are doing something. We want that to be the case. But in regards to the tactical instructions, for most of them, it would pretty much be the case that you change it and then, within 10 seconds, you can see that it's done something. Like, you can, you drop your defensive line, it's going to drop. Like, it's going to just happen and you can just see that it's happened, type of thing. You want your team to attack with more width, you said it, they just will, and you can just see it, sort of thing. So we really wanted it to be... you just want people to be able to see the impact of the changes that they make.
Yeah.
Because what's the point in having a slider that you set it to something and you can't see what it does? Like,
exactly. That's the whole idea of the new match engine, really, isn't it? It's just you might feel the effects sort of in the background with the current match engine, but you can't see it, can you? This new match engine, you'll be able to see. You move your defensive lineup, you'll be able to see your player, the dots representing your players. You'll be able to see them moving up, won't you?
Yeah, and I think it's just particularly important if you can see the whole match.
Yeah. As
well, right? Because if you could only see the highlights or something, you're then in some sort of middle ground between what we have now and seeing everything, right? Where you won't necessarily see what all the tactical sliders do, because if that tactical slider doesn't impact any highlights, then you don't see what it does. Pretty much, right? So you're only going to see it in the statistics, which is what we have now, right? So it's particularly important that you can see what all the sliders do when you can watch the whole match, because we want people to basically be watching the match, seeing how it's going, and actually making decisions based on how the match is unfolding. Mm-hmm. And, being empowered that good understanding and good decisions means that on average you will end up with better results.
Absolutely. Okay, well, hopefully that's whetted everyone's appetite a little bit. Hopefully we should see that by the end of the month. Did you say, Nick? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Great. And I think that pretty much wraps it up for what we wanted to cover this time. We'll post a link to this up on the forum. So if you've got anything you want to know about today's podcast, please ask in the thread. We'll do our best to cover it. Thank you very much for listening. We'll talk to you next time.